People always ask how I balance my family life with 400 shows a year. I'm just doing what I love with the people I love. It's my magic life.
I like Wes Iseli. I like everything about him.
All right, guys, we are back. And this week we have, man, I am looking forward to this one. I got my toys out. I'm ready to rock and roll. You never know who you're going to have on the podcast. I never would have thought I'd be talking to one of the writers for Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, all of these awesome movies. My dad had a video store when I was growing up. So I lived in the horror movie section. So this is up my alley. Everybody, it's Alan Katz. What's up, buddy?
It is a pleasure to meet you both. You know, it's funny. I just did a horror convention out in Ontario, California, the CreepyCon, which is the biggest horror convention in the Inland Empire part of Southern California. And it first of all, I love doing conventions because I love having FaceTime with Tales from the Crypt fans. Tales from the Crypt has such an unusual place in the horror world because for so many people, Tales from the Crypt kind of popped their horror cherry, as it were. It was, we either, in a lot of cases, it was the show that their parents said, no, you're not going to watch that, and they watched it in spite of what their parents said, or in a surprising number of cases, they watched it with their parents because their parents thought the Tales from the Crypt was a safer entree into the world of horror than anything else, which is kind of strange when you consider what we did on Tales from the Crypt and what the Crypt Keeper did. But there was something about the Crypt Keeper that made it okay. And yeah. I'm
trying to think about these parents' knowledge or logic of why this is a better entree, because I'm thinking gore, blood, slasher. Yes, they had that. They had sex. They definitely had that.
Gosh, yeah.
I don't know anything that made it PG.
The thing that, for a lot of people, what Tales from the Crypt really was, the stories, the all that, it was the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah.
It really, a couple years ago, M. Night Shyamalan wanted to remake Tales from the Crypt. A lot of people have wanted to remake Tales from the Crypt. It is never going to happen for reasons I'll explain to you momentarily. The problem is that when he optioned Tales from the Crypt, he didn't understand what he was getting, more to the point, what he was not getting. The Crypt Keeper in the EC Comics is an old white guy with stringy hair. The Crypt Keeper in Tales from the Crypt, the TV series, is a completely separate creature that was a character that was created for the TV series. One of my executive producers, Joel Silver, he found Kevin Yeager. And Kevin Yeager created the puppet. And Kevin Yeager found John Kassir, who became the voice of the Crypt Keeper. Now, that was part of the Crypt Keeper's creation, but the way the Tales from the Crypt came together was not like most other TV shows. You know, there was no development process. 4 huge TV producers approached HBO at a time when the feature film world was over here and the TV world was way over here. And today people go back and forth. Back then, that did not happen. If you were TV, you were TV. If you were feature, you were feature. The occasional Tom Hanks or Robin Williams would go from TV into features. If you were going from features into TV, that meant your career was done. So there was a wide gap between these two worlds. And HBO, they had done 2 TV shows before that, First and 10 and Dream On, Ryan Benben's show. And those are basically just single camera shows with tits and the word fuck. Otherwise, there was nothing extraordinary about them. When these 4 big Hollywood producers, Joel Silver, Richard Donner, Walter Hill, and Robert Zemeckis, approached HBO, they said, we want a big feature film scope inside little TV box. HBO said, yeah, great, do it, whatever you want. And that is what they did. Like I said, then Joel found Kevin and Kevin found John, but it never went through a development process. And no one, as they began to write the episodes, whoever wrote the episode would throw a couple lines at the Crypt Keeper. But there was no, who was the Crypt Keeper? At the end of I went aboard at the beginning of the 3rd season. And one of my jobs was to write the Crypt Keeper. And as I sat down to do it, the thing that struck me was, who is he? No one had developed the character. It was just this, it was the talking puppet called the Crypt Keeper. And my question was, like, I don't know how to write a cipher. I don't know how to write for a character that isn't, especially when you want him to be funny. You can't write it generically. It really, if you really want to write comedy, it's got to come out of character, who our character is. So in order to write for the Crypt Keeper, because he did not exist, I had to create the character. Now, I grew up a big fan of Groucho Marx. That was, Groucho Marx wordplay to me was everything. And so, to me, the Crypt Keeper became my little Groucho Marx. And since I had to fill him with a personality, something to write, the closest one at hand, and being a lazy writer, I chose me. And so, really, I filled the Crypt Keeper with me. And though the Crypt Keeper doesn't look like me and it doesn't sound like me, holy shit, everything he said came out of my head. Every idea he had was mine. So the strange thing is the Crypt Keeper doesn't become the Crypt Keeper, the character that we're talking about, until season 3. Here's a proof that I'm not full of shit here. My executive producer, Joel Silver.
No one's doubting you.
No. But what I'm saying, Joel Silver was not a man to give away anything that he didn't have to. And Joel Silver made a merchandising deal with me. Anything Crypt Keeper related, I got a cut of. Now, if the Crypt Keeper character had existed before I had got there, he would have said, write for the character, stupid, and shut the fuck up. But he did not. Because there was no Crypt Keeper character before I sat down, it became really a necessity to create him. So what was really quite amazing as I attend these, when you see people live, I must have seen 20 Crypt Keeper tattoos over the weekend. And that, almost more than anything, blows my mind, because what people are, I think what they're connecting to with the Crypt Keeper, yes, it's the puppet has a look, but the tattoo doesn't have a voice. What you're putting on your flesh is the essence, is the nature of the character and what it means to you. And so that's something of my own contribution to this character, a significant piece of the contribution, I think, has made them put this image on their flesh. That I feel like I've done something, good, bad, or indifferent, I'm not sure, but to recognize that you've had this impact on your audience, on your fans, that you've created something that they love this much, that they take it not just to heart, but to their literal flesh.
And he's known worldwide. Everybody knows the Crypt Keeper. I mean, it's a household name. It is
strangely humbling, and it was both a joy and, yeah, I feel a tremendous sense of responsibility. So, whenever I meet fans, I feel like it's my responsibility to make them feel like putting that image on their flesh, they should feel like, oh my God, when I met the guy who is part of the reason why I put this on my flesh, I thought, wow, yes, I want the Crypt Keeper. I understand why the Crypt Keeper is on my flesh. I met the guy who filled him with life, and yes, that's kind of what's inside that tattoo.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. He mentioned Richard Donner. Richard Donner is the one that made Superman.
Oh, yeah. You'll believe a man can fly.
I am a huge Superman fan. Huh. All my kids are named after Superman.
Yeah.
So I'm one of those. I don't have the tattoos, but I'm one of those that named all my kids after Superman. So
I can tell you that Christopher Reeve was a lovely, lovely person. It was fun working with Christopher Reeve. Challenging in his own way because, actors are all crazy. But, it was so tragic what happened to him.
And it happened in our hometown. It happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. Yeah. He went to the hospital. Superman is paralyzed in the hospital my mom works in. What is going on? The world, that was my 9/11. I know that's probably not nice to say, but my world shattered that day. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, God, life takes the strangest turns, alas.
It don't make sense, man.
Right.
But all right, so let's rewind everything because I'm so fascinated with the Crypt Keeper. I'm so fascinated with you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for doing this. I'm so excited. How do you become a writer? I mean, I'm a kid. I have a couple books on Amazon, but even when I was writing those, I'm like, why does anybody want to read what I wrote? I'm no different than anybody else. What put you on that spell to our trajectory? I guess I should say.
I got lucky. I think I hit this town a very good writer. Over the course of being here and over the course of living my life, I think I ultimately became actually a storyteller and not just a writer, but that's something else entirely. When, I was always a writer. When I went to Vassar, I grew up in Baltimore. I went to school in New York. Like I said, I went to Vassar. Thought I was going to be an actor. But when I was at Vassar, we had to take dramatic literature classes. And the dramatic literature professor was a guy named Everett Sprinshorn, who was one of the world authorities on Strindberg and Ibsen. And his lecture on Ibsen's Ghosts, which is a story about a woman named Mrs. Alving. Early in her life, she has been made to marry a man she didn't really want to. And he, it turns out, cheated on her constantly, has syphilis, and they have a son, and the son Oswald has developed syphilis, and as the play starts, he's 18, I think he's coming home to die. And it's a play about the sins of the father being visited upon the son. And Ibsen was the kind of playwright who wrote what are called utilitarian dramas. The point was to, make the world a better place for writing your damn play. When Professor Sprinshorn, again, we had all read the play. We knew the story. He deconstructed it, and then he put it back together again for us. And as he takes us to the ending where Mrs. Alving has wheeled Oswald in a wheelchair down the stage so that he is facing the audience and she is behind him so he cannot see her face. And he's saying at the very end of the play, "Oh, look, Mother, the sun is setting. Isn't it beautiful?" And of course, the metaphor is, yes, the sun, her whole world is dying, never mind the day. When he brought us to that moment in his lecture, I suddenly understood how stories had to work. It didn't mean I could do it, but I understood it, and I absolutely got that your job, if you choose to accept it, is to make that happen. Is to make a ghost happen every time out the door. That's what you should be shooting for. Now, it took me a long time before I could do anything about that. I think I did a lot of... but that's kind of what set me on my course. When I was, I had a friend from school who had become an agent at William Morris. And she said, just after a couple years after I was out of college, she said, you should really try writing a screenplay. And so I wrote one. And she said, that's pretty good. You should come out and meet and greet people. And so in June of 1985, and again, I was determined that I was a New Yorker, and a theater person, and to me, Los Angeles was the stupidest fucking place on the planet. It was the land of the avocado head. And I got to L.A., like I said, I'd written a screenplay, I had all these meetings set up, and everyone was so nice to me. First of all, it's June. You know, in New York in June, it's hot and it's humid, and walking around the city, it smells like piss everywhere. In LA, it's the desert, man. There is no humidity. It was beautiful every day. The sun was shining. It was gorgeous. And like I said, people treated me like a prince. Man, so much smoke blowing up my ass. I highly recommend it. It's very, very good feeling. One night, my agent took me to a premiere, St. Elmo's Fire. And let me tell you, that was heady. And then I had the next morning off, and someone suggested I drive through Topanga Canyon, which is a very lovely part of L.A. 40 years ago, when it was nothing, it was nowhere near as built up and crowded and congested as it is today. And the drive is from the 101, the freeway, through the Santa Monica Mountains as they plunge at the Pacific Coast Highway right into the Pacific. And by the time I got to the PCH, I fuck New York, man. I was I had sold my soul completely to this devil, L.A.
Wow.
And the very next month I moved out, and I have, L.A. has... Yeah, I love L.A. It is the strangest fucking place on the planet, but it's the first place I've ever felt at home. I became one of the first people I met that week. Became a friend and a creative collaborator, a guy named Gil Adler. And Gil was, he was a producer. He came out of theater, but he was an accountant by training. And Gil understood that if you have $1 to spend on your movie, don't spend $1 because you ain't got it. But hey, if you can make this movie for 99 cents and make it look like the dollar, that's better. Hey, if you can do it for 99 cents and make it look like $1.15, you might be onto something. And so that was kind of his strategy as a producer. HBO liked Gil a lot. He did a show for them called The Hitchhiker quite a long time ago. And then they had a show that was in trouble called Vietnam War Stories that was shooting outside of Savannah. And Gil went in, and as a responsible producer, he saved, he not only saved the budget and saved the show, the show won a bunch of awards. A couple years went by, and another show on HBO was in trouble. And it was called Tales from the Crypt. As I said, it was not set up like a regular show, and the executive producers, who were all feature guys, you gotta run a TV show differently than you run a feature film. It's just a different animal. The economics of it are different, and what it costs to make an episode is not going to get paid for on its first or second run. That license fee, whatever it is, that's why you get a deficit partner. The whole nature of the TV business was based on a show can't get to profitability until it gets the syndication. In order to get the syndication, you got to have 65 episodes, because that's an advertising cycle is 13 weeks, and a show that you're going to syndicate, you're going to strip 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. So 5 times 13 is 65. So back in the day when you went to pitch a TV show, it had to be something that you could do 65 variations of a theme. And so that's why most shows back in the day, there was no continuous storytelling, because where it was going to be profitable was in syndication, and people weren't going to watch it in any particular order. They had to be able to watch this episode, that episode, this episode, that episode. And so the whole nature of TV storytelling was very different back then. And HBO and Tales from the Crypt changed it. There's a story that after they did the first 3 episodes of Tales from the Crypt, Richard Donner's Dig This Cat, He's Real Gone, Bob Zemeckis is All Through the House, and Walter Hill's The Man Who Is Death. At the press and crew screening, after they ran the first episode, the cast and crew screening, I should say, 2 of the crew members are sitting in the second row. One says, "Wow, that's great TV," and the other says, "It's not TV, it's HBO." And the 2 HBO execs in the row ahead turn, they look back, they go, "Oh my God." They just heard not just their ad slogan, their culture. And really and truly, Tales from the Crypt changed HBO's culture. and they suddenly saw themselves as feature image inside little box. And ultimately, that led to shows like Sopranos, of course. Just went up on the fantasy one.
Everything. No, but
Yeah,
everything.
a lot,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
my
that's
question is, like, I remember my timeline, obviously, Tales from the Crypt, but Quantum Leap comes to mind. Every week was a different set. It's totally different than the week before. It could be set in the 50s. It could be in Vietnam. It could be in China. It could be the money that costs alone. Oh my gosh.
What we at Tales from the Crypt, we benefited from a great production designer named Greg Melton, and Greg had worked with Gil and I on a show called Freddy's Nightmares a bunch of years before, and
I want to ask about that too.
yeah, and Freddy's Nightmares was a puzzle. Holy cow! Putting that show together was ludicrous. But what Greg was really good at doing was at turning sets around quickly, but really incredibly detailed sets. And so what Greg kind of created was a process where, you know, we run crews overnight to build and put sets up, take sets down. So there was a whole building and dismantling process that was baked into how we got it done. You know, on Tales from the Crypt, our pattern, our production pattern, was to be we were on location for 2 days usually and in for 3 days. So, you know, how we scheduled the location days would give Greg time to, you know, really reinvent the wheel, because being in a strict anthology with no continuing characters and no continuing sets, yeah, every episode is the wheel reinvented. And
Has that been done before Crypt? I don't know of any shows. I guess Twilight Zone, something like that, maybe.
I don't know that they did it under the time duress that we did it. We had.
That's cute.
I don't know what their production schedule was like. Gil is an amazingly good producer, and on Crypt we had a really strong system. What happened with Crypt during the second season, like I said, because they didn't treat it like a regular TV show, they went wildly over budget. The second season, which was 18 episodes. And the night before the wrap party, the executive producers were handed a financial by HBO, who had been they had been cash flowing it. And the whole thing was $1 million cash in the shitter. And so HBO said, get out your checkbooks, guys, or there won't be a season 3, which was supposed to be the last season. So the executive producers got out their checkbooks and literally paid HBO $1 million. They canceled the wrap party, and they fired everybody. And they hired Gil and me, in theory, to see the season out, to see the show out. There was not supposed to be anything beyond a season 3. That was supposed to be the end of it. But Gil and I had other plans, and not only did we reinvigorate the stories and that part, but like I said, we created the Crypt Keeper. And that suddenly made a huge difference. We ran for 4 more seasons, with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 5 seasons after that. We did 70 some odd episodes after that.
Yeah.
So how
That's
closely
great.
did you work with everybody that came on set?
My job my fingertips were the last fingertips that would ever type any script. So everything had to go through me before it went out. So there were a lot of episodes, and I was also, responsible for the casting process. And once it got into the production phase, there were a lot of episodes where I wouldn't get to the set terribly often because, you're writing. I was writing an episode. I was prepping an episode. An episode was in production that had notes that had to be addressed. There was always a show in post-production, And yeah, so there really was not a lot of time to go and hang out on a set. Although occasionally there were actors who, fuck it, I'm going to go to the set and hang out. Hey, when Roger Daltrey did the show, yeah, we hung out a lot. Okay, I'm going to hang out with Roger Daltrey. Okay, although
I just didn't know if you were writing on set to be right there and to help you were right there on set, right there where they're acting.
You know, it was not unusual for us to have to rewrite on the fly. Right. When Toby Hooper's episode, we bumped into a huge problem where Toby had planned this Toby's episode, Dead Weight, Whoopi
Was
Goldberg.
he directing or acting?
Pardon?
He was directing.
He directed the episode. Right? Yeah. Toby directed the Deadweight episode with Whoopi Goldberg, James Remar, Vanity, and John Rhys Davies. And there was a scene where the search for this black pearl and where it was hidden, and I forget where it was originally supposed to be hidden in this wonderful set that Greg Melton had built, this tropical home where, and we were never going to make the day. And Toby was beside himself with panic. What am I going to do? How am I going to shoot this, searching this whole room? How are we going to do this? And Gil and I said to Toby, look, just you keep shooting what you're shooting. We're going to go up. We're going to figure out a solution to the problem. And we went up. We put our heads together and we came up with an idea. And we went back to him and we presented it to him. And we said, does this idea work for you? And he said, yeah, I think, okay, yeah, I think it could work. Okay, good. Then in that case, we're not going to use this whole set. The whole thing, that this whole search is going to take place in this other set. Instead of searching the set, we took where the pearl was and we relocated it to inside John Rhys Davies' body. And suddenly we invented a whole thing where James Remar was going to have to cut him open and dig it out with his hands. We invented a whole other way to play it. Because we weren't going to make the day, we couldn't shoot this, we had to shoot this, and we came up actually with an idea that was better than what was originally on the page.
Wow.
By a lot.
That's awesome.
By a lot.
So you guys had a lot of liberty. You didn't have to stick with the comic book. You got to go and veer and do your own thing.
Just the title. The only thing we were obligated to was the title.
Well, that gave you a ton of freedom.
Wow, yeah, no kidding.
Well, as I said, most of them didn't add up to a half-hour TV show anyway. So It was sheer necessity that we were going to have to invent most of the story anyway.
Yeah. Did you pull any ideas, though, from the comic book? For any
Sure.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Wherever we could, there was some original... Yes, there's something that we took from the comic book, but we would then, in some case... update it.
Right.
Two for the show, is ultimately about a gay relationship that was not in the comic. There's a reveal at the end. The cop character, we think he's after the murderer. No, he's trying to pin the fact that he killed someone on the murderer. Is the whole reveal?
I'm loving this so much. I can't wait to I want to dig out my DVDs and just start watching now. Now that I know you and know you are the voice of the Crypt Keeper, do you have a Crypt Keeper at your house?
I used to. I wasn't the voice of the Crypt Keeper. I just wrote. I was the voice in his head. I was the voice in his head.
Right. Well, yeah.
I used to have a life-size Crypt Keeper. He fell apart over the course of the years, over the course of a bunch of Halloweens. I used to have a Tales from the Crypt pinball machine. When they decided to make a pinball machine, I was given a choice because I wrote there's all kinds of copy. The Crypt Keeper talks in the pinball machine, and so I was given a choice. I think they was offering me $3,500 or a pinball machine, so of course I took the pinball machine.
That's awesome, dude. So what happened to the pinball machine?
Alas, that is in storage somewhere. I'm not even sure where it is anymore. Hard times made having space for a pinball machine and being able to move it around rather difficult. So,
yeah, I get it.
Life.
All right, so let me ask about Freddy's Nightmares, and I'm going to tell you, I haven't seen any of them. This came out before, I want to say Roku, but what was the first recording device thing? TiVo. This was before
Oh.
TiVo. I remember Freddy's Nightmares being advertised, but I don't know when it came on. I never caught it. But I am a huge Freddy Krueger fan. My dad had a video store, and New Line Cinema had a contest that if you bought so many copies of the movie, you got a chance to have your name put in to be an extra in one of the, like, part 3, I think. Demon Warrior. I had a t-shirt with Freddy Krueger claw marks. I used to wear it to school. I thought I was going to be in the movie. My dad said he put me in it. We bought like 10 copies of the movie. I'm all set. I'm a huge Freddy fan. But I never got to see Freddy's Nightmares because I didn't have TiVo. I was young. I didn't set up a VCR. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Freddy's Nightmares was strange. When they first started, it was during the 1987 writer's strike or 88 writer's strike, whenever there was a writer's strike back then. And so the first 6 episodes were written during the strike, and so they hired a bunch of non-Writers Guild writers, and that was me at the time. And Gil, he was producing the show, but he was not. Neither was in the Writers Guild, so we could write. And originally, the idea for the show was that they wanted each half hour to be a separate story, but that it worked with the second half hour. That's that the 2 half hours worked as an hour, so that they could syndicate them if the situation presented itself as a half-hour show or an hour show. And so that was a little bit of a puzzle to write stories that worked half and half and as a whole.
Wow.
The second season of Freddy's, they suddenly got it into their heads, hey, what if we could sell these as little movies in Europe? And so then each 2 hours had to be a movie, but also 4 half hours that could work standalone, and 2 hours that could work standalone. It was like a fucking Rubik's Cube of storytelling.
No kidding.
Wow.
Yeah,
Ugh.
it just...
I don't know where to
Like-
start. I'd be so confused in my own head. Like,
So was Freddy like the Crypt Keeper? Did he intro and then go into his? Yeah, that's what I was thinking it was. Okay.
And, you know, it was... In a couple of the movies, there was a kind of a... Freddy kind of got funny. And so that's the Freddy that really was the host of Freddy's Nightmares. He was the
Was it Robert
funny
Englund?
Freddy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, and you know, yeah, it was an okay show. It was, you know, finally the strike ended. They brought in all the they fired all the scab writers, and it went union, and it's a perfectly good show.
Now I want to go back.
There ain't nothing wrong with it.
The kid in me
It ain't
is
Tales
coming
from the
up-
Crypt though.
I think I want to go see if I can find it on DVD though, because daggone it, the kid in me is going crazy.
You know, Wes, I would be curious to know your reaction to episodes of Freddy's Nightmares. You are a horror aficionado. I would be curious to know where it fell in the greater scheme of things horror.
I just want to see how they line up, so how they're separate but they're together, and that's interesting.
We've done a little
Now
work
that
in
you
TV.
know,
We
yeah.
know how it is behind the scenes and how chaotic it can be, and sometimes this department doesn't talk to this department, which causes a whole day of chaos. Where if they just would talk, we've been there, so we know, and we're interested in the background as well.
Yeah.
It takes a good, strong producer, and you know, my former partner Gil was really a terrific producer. Really, he understood how to do it efficiently and without crushing people. I mean,
Yeah.
When we did Tales from the Crypt, our turnover rate, our crew was minimal. Was like 3-4%. We really had a great relationship with our crew, which is what made it really just tragic in a certain way when we did Bordello of Blood, and we didn't do it in Los Angeles. We shot that in Vancouver.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
The
So-
reason we shot board, which we
Go
did
ahead.
simply because Joel was always in a combat with the IA, the union that represented our crew, and sometimes Joel was up and sometimes the union was up, and they, before we did Bordello of Blood, they had struck a TV movie, they shut it down, and so Joel's attitude was fuck me, fuck you, and so we shot Bordello of Blood in Vancouver, not because we wanted to shoot it in Vancouver, we didn't and we shouldn't have. It was to say, screw you to the IA.
All right, so I ask you if you work closely with all the people, because all the celebrities you guys had on Tales from the Crypt, and also all the directors that you guys had. I'm a huge Arnold fan. I am a huge Arnold Schwarzenegger fan. Did you get to meet him, hang out with him on set?
That
How
was
it?
season two before my time.
Oh man.
Season
I was
2,
hoping
but
for an Arnold story.
I was there for I was there for Michael J. Fox and Tom Hanks. Hey, when Bob Zemeckis directed, I wrote Bob's episodes. Aside from his first Christmas episode, I co-wrote Yellow and I wrote You Murderer, which I got to say, working with Zemeckis, such a joy. The most amazing collaborator ever. Everything I know about the art of collaboration, I learned at that man's feet. It's really, he has a way of in the best way. Well, first of all, he brings out the best of everybody on a set. And he has a way of challenging you. Every single Zemeckis movie, if you look at it, there's at least 1, 2, sometimes 3 or 4 shots that are, if you know anything about filmmaking, they're impossible. That's an impossible shot. Okay. How the fuck did you get that? An example. In Castaway, there's the shot where Tom Hanks climbs the mountain finally, and he does the survey to see that it's completely surrounded by reef. Well, if you remember, as he climbs the hill, the top of it is this really narrow piece, and the camera is kind of on his shoulder. It's like, you can see Tom's face in it the whole time, and he gets to the top and he does this turns and he does a whole 360, and by the time he finishes the 360, if you know anything about filmmaking, there's one question in your head: Where's the crew?
Right.
Yeah.
Where did you put everybody? Because that camera that's on Tom's shoulder is not sitting on Tom's shoulder. That's a big fucking camera. They didn't have GoPros back then that could create an
And they're
image
all
like this.
tiptoeing.
And so,
No way.
having worked with Bob, I know something like this happened. They were on the location, and Bob said, "Okay, we're going to do the scene on this mountain, guys. Let's go." And so they all climb the mountain, and Bob gets on top there with the crew. He says, "All right, here's what I think what I'm looking for, guys. But the camera's going to be on Tom's shoulder so we can see him all here. We're going to he's going to turn and like 360 all the way around, and of course we can't see anybody. How are we going to do this, guys?" And it's the how are we going to do this, guys? The posing of the impossible question. Of course, Bob has ideas as to how he's going to do it, but he's putting it out to the creative floor, to everyone there. And so in this way, everyone is invited. Please make a suggestion. It might not be the one that goes all the way. But there might be a piece that, if we borrow a piece of this and a piece of that, suddenly we have an idea that this is going to work just fine, everybody. And suddenly everybody invests in the thing that we're doing. It becomes this Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours, and it is, that's how you get the best out of everyone. 1 + 1 = 50.
Yeah, and I, from what I know, a lot of times they have egos, and they don't want to ask that. I know how to do the shot. I'm the director. I know how to do this, and yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. There are plenty of people walking around always protecting their fiefdom. Yeah, sure. But it's a matter of the man's confidence in his own creative abilities that it really, and it's about the end product. The end product will speak for us all. The better it is, does it really matter whose actual idea it was? This is a collaborative enterprise. And really the point of the exercise is to get the very best out of everyone. There are ways to do that. Hey, my other executive producer, Joel Silver, had no idea how to get the best out of everyone other than trying to terrorize them into doing it. That doesn't work.
No, yeah.
It does not work at all.
Do you think he's changed over the years?
No.
Okay.
No, in fact, Joel just got the last couple things he had. He just got fired off of something because, nobody wants to work. It's life is too short, and nobody wants to work with that. After a certain point, it's just, no. Why?
Yeah.
All right. So before we get to what you're doing nowadays, tell me about Children of the Corn 2. I'm curious about that.
Children of the Corn 2, it's funny why that movie came into being. Gil had worked on a couple of projects with a guy named Scott Stone, who was part of a company called Stone Stanley. They did a lot of game shows and stuff like that. Scott Stone is a lovely, lovely person. Scott Stone lived at the top of on Sunset Boulevard, top of Sunset Plaza, right at the top there. Amazing views. He had a house with what the real estate folks called jetliner views of the LA, an amazing piece of property. Just down the hill was a guy named Larry. I'm going up on his name. We'll call him Larry. And Larry was a big was a movie producer who had owned some cheap movie properties. And he wanted to put up something on outside his house that would have partially obstructed Scott Stone's view. And so Scott Stone and Larry began negotiating. And Scott suddenly saw a way, the view wouldn't be too badly hurt. But he said, tell you what, in order to get this deal closed, you have control of the Children of the Corn that. We'd like to make Children of the Corn 2. If you will let us do that and you'll finance it, we'll make this deal. And so that's what happened. It was a deal that started over an obstructed view at the top of Sunset Strip. And so that's how that movie started. And then Gil and I, we got working on the script and we decided to make it about, I think we made it it was ergot, that something in the plant was causing the madness, which was a real thing.
Ergot, ergot.
Yeah, ergot. And so, but at we wrote the script and it was all being set up. And as all that was happening, Gil and I suddenly got Tales from the Crypt. And we had to make a choice. We either do this dumb little movie or we do Tales from the Crypt. We chose Tales from the Crypt. So Scott and the director, they hired a guy named David Price. They all went to, I think, South Carolina or North Carolina to shoot it. And if we had been on the set, it would have been a very different movie. Scott was not an experienced movie producer. And so when the director was too timid at certain times, we hired an actress. There was a nude scene. And when it came time to do the nude scene with the girl under the waterfall, he didn't have the nerve. And so she stands under the waterfall fully dressed. Huh. What? What? Stupid little things happen. It's a perfectly good little movie. I think there's some really funny stuff in it. I think the fatal nosebleed is hilarious. That was fun to write. I'm not sure I've seen the movie the whole way through ever.
Okay, all right, yeah.
It was not a movie, because it was a movie that, we were involved with. We wrote it, and then I was doing Tales from the Crypt, and I was doing Tales from the Crypt. Children of the Corn 2 was this little sequel off over there. I don't do sequels, I do Tales from the Crypt.
I don't think I've ever seen I don't think I've ever seen Children of the Corn 2. That's why I was asking about it. I don't remember coming through the video before.
It relaunched that title, and there are a bunch of sequels. I think they've done 6 or 7. I don't know.
I have no idea.
Wow.
It was the stupid sequel that launched a bunch of stupid sequels.
Wow. So you said you had a piece of the Crypt Keeper merch. Did you have anything to do with the cartoon? Because I remember the cartoon being big. Okay.
No, I only merch related to the Crypt Keeper because of related to his character. I probably should have, because the fact that there was a children's cartoon would never have happened if the character had not been that way. But by that point, I was no longer working with them.
Right.
We did the last season of Crypt in London, and we were in London while we were editing Bordello of Blood, and making Tales from the Crypt was a fantastic experience. Everyone who did Tales from the Crypt, if you meet them today and as they look back at their careers, they would tell you that doing Tales from the Crypt was one of the most satisfying creative experiences of our lives. Bordello of Blood was the antithesis of all of that. We weren't even supposed to make Bordello of Blood. We were supposed to do a whole other movie as the second Tales from the Crypt feature. We were supposed to make this thing called Dead Easy. We had spent 18 months developing this. Dead Easy was the original mandate when we got the order for 3 movies from Universal was 3 different movies. And so, the consensus was amongst the brain trust in the Crypt world that we would make Demon Knight first and monster movie. Gil was supposed to direct the first feature. He didn't want to do a monster movie, so we hired Ernest Dickerson. And we began to develop a script that we wanted to work on, which was, hey, they were all supposed to be different. All right, we didn't want to do a monster movie. We found this script, this taut psychological thriller that we developed into a thing called Dead Easy. It took place in the swamps outside New Orleans. There was a wonderful Harlequin character as the villain, great villain. And we spent months in New Orleans prepping it. And 3 weeks before the start of principal photography, Universal changed its mind. And they pulled the plug on Dead Easy. They said, come home. What had happened was, they said, you're going to make this other thing called Bordello of Blood instead. Oh, and your release date hasn't changed. You still start in 3 weeks. Now, the reason that suddenly
that sounds right. That sounds what we've witnessed. Yeah, that sounds like what we've dealt with.
The reason that Bordello of Blood happened is this. At about this time, a new studio had come into being called, excuse me. Damn it.
It's okay. No worries.
I apologize. A new studio had come into being called DreamWorks.
Okay.
DreamWorks was Steven Spielberg leaving Universal. He stayed on the lot, but in essence leaving Universal. And as companies do, he began making talent deals, and Universal was afraid of losing another huge piece of talent to DreamWorks. One of my executive producers, Bob Zemeckis, Steven was his mentor. And Universal went to Bob and they said, Bob, we love you here at Universal. What can we do to make you stay? And I don't know any other part of that deal. It must have been great because Bob stayed, but I know one deal point. Universal agreed to buy the first student script that Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale, the future Back to the Future guys, ever wrote when they were students at USC Film School. A thing called Bordello of Blood. Universal agreed to buy it for $500,000. It was simply to put money in Bob's pocket as a way to make this deal as good as they could make it for Bob. No, make a movie. That was never part of the design. But then Universal began to think, oh my God, are we going to eat $500,000? How do we explain this to the stockholders? They suddenly realized, wait a minute, Bob's about to produce this other horror movie, this Dead Easy thing. Well, that script cost $50,000. Fuck that shit. They tossed that. They said, well, you'll take it out of your budget. And instead, they said, you're going to make Bordello of Blood. Instead, hey, it's got Bob Zemeckis' name on it. That's better than your name. And so, for that reason, because Universal didn't want to eat $500,000, we made Bordello of Blood. So we went from making a movie that we were all devoted to making. Gil and I, neither of us is horror guys. And yeah, horror's been great, but we really saw Dead Easy because of the kind of movie that it was that we envisioned making. It was going to be our way to show Hollywood that we were not one-trick ponies, that we weren't just horror guys. We could do, a serious movie, and that's what we envisioned. And so we went from doing, all of us doing this movie that we really had hopes and expectations for, to making a fucking student script, a student movie, which is exactly what it was. It was a student script. Look, Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale, they went on to write huge movies, but they weren't those writers when they were at USC Film School. They were students. And so I had 3 weeks to rewrite my boss. He was very generous and gracious about it. He said, do whatever you need. But it was an impossible assignment. The main character in Bordello of Blood is a small town detective. Now, think about this. How much business can a detective really do in a small town? Not enough to be a detective in a small town. So it's a character who does not exist here in reality. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you write for that. I don't know how you build a story around a character that doesn't really exist. And so it was an impossible assignment to rewrite this into something that resembled a decent story. It certainly was never going to resemble the movie that we weren't going to get to do anymore, Dead Easy. And so once you make that wrong decision to make a movie for the wrong decision, well, the thing about Demon Knight's a terrific movie. It's got a great mythology. It lives in a bigger world than ours. Bordello of Blood has no mythology. It's about vampire hookers. That's it. That's it. That's the whole thing. Vampire hookers in a bordello.
But for a teenage kid, that sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah. But for the guys making them. Oh, I know. Look. The movie is the movie, but I can tell you honestly that every day making that movie was stupider than the day before it. Why did we cast Dennis Miller? I couldn't tell you. To this day, I don't know why Joel wanted Dennis Miller. We wanted Danny Baldwin, Gil and I. We wanted an actor. Dennis Miller didn't want to do the movie. He so didn't want to do the movie that he said, yeah, give me $1 million, I'll do it. Figuring, no, we would never pay him $1 million because no one had ever paid Dennis Miller to be $1 million to be in a movie. He'd done a couple of small movies before then for scale. But
wow.
For some reason, Joel said yes. Now, we were $12 million budget. I didn't have $1 million in my budget for lead actor. I had $500,000. So we went to Universal. We said, can you help us? Can you give us some breakage? They said, give a fuck about Dennis Miller. My audience was into special effects and makeup. Dennis Miller's a political comedian on HBO. It's nothing to do with my audience. But I had to take $500,000 out of the stuff my audience wanted to see to pay an actor they didn't give a fuck about. That was a Joel decision. I still don't know why. Erica Leniak, that wasn't our choice, but I understand why Joel wanted to make that choice. It wasn't a good choice in the end because Erica didn't want to do the movie either. In fact, she didn't want to do movies like this at all, which she only told us about when she got there. So we had to rewrite the script on the fly, literally while we were already in production, so that she would get on the fucking airplane and be on set, and be in wardrobe on Monday to shoot on Tuesday. We started shooting on a Thursday. I'm having an argument with her manager on the weekend because she doesn't want to play an ex-porn star anymore. She doesn't want to play those kind of parts. Honey, you just took a job playing a character in Bordello of Blood. What the fuck are you talking about? So we had to rewrite the script on the fly just to get her to get on the fucking airplane.
Goodness.
I didn't want Angie Everhart either. And the reason that Angie Everhart is in the movie is because look, Angie's a lovely person. But at the time that we were shooting this in Vancouver, Joel was shooting a movie in Seattle called Assassins with Antonio Banderas and Sly Stallone, who was at the time engaged to Angie. Yeah. Well, one day on the set, hearing that we were going to be shooting our movie in Vancouver, apparently Sly approached Joel. He said, "Hey, Joel, here can we make a movie in Vancouver? Put my girlfriend Angie in a movie. We can visit each other across the border. It'd be really great." And rather than being a prudent executive producer and saying, "That's a great idea, Sly, but let me check with the guys to see if that works for them." He didn't. He said, "That's a great idea, Sly. Let's do it." And we begged him, "God, please, no, don't do that. First of all, it's the villain of the movie. It's just like casting. It's like casting Pee Wee Herman as Freddy Krueger. No, fuck no. Don't do that. If you cast your villain badly, you're done. Stick a fork in the whole fucking thing." Angie gave it her best try, but it was wrong of us to even ask. She didn't have the chops to do it. Billy Zane Billy Zane is a wonderful villain in Demon Knight. That's a lot of why that movie succeeds. We wanted Robin Givens, was who we wanted to hire, and Joel would not let us do that. He insisted on Angie. We did everything we could to talk him out of it, but Joel wanted to service Sly on that movie. He didn't give a fuck about what the ripple effect was on our movie. It turned out that Sly had an ulterior motive. And he intended to break up with Angie, and our movie was the consolation prize. "Hey, I got your movie, didn't I?" And that is exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened. And 2/3 of the way through the movie, he did break up with her. And what was really painful was that our production office, and all of us, I was aware of the fact, because we were getting calls from the production staff on Assassins all the time. Things between Sly and Angie. Sometimes they at one point, arranging her transfer to get her there over the weekends. And then at a certain point they said, can you hold her for the weekends? Can she not come? Can you keep her from coming to Seattle? So we were very much aware of the fact that something was going on. Now, there's a story that's told about Sly Stallone. He's never denied the story. The only question has been, on what film set did it take place? And I'm telling you it took place on Assassins because I'd never heard the story before. I heard it for the first time on my film set because it came from the film set on Assassins that way. Stallone finishes a scene and he heads back to his trailer, unaware of the fact that his wireless lavalier mic is still broadcasting to the sound card. And there's a young lady waiting for him in his trailer, and she proceeds to give him a blowjob. And apparently Sly is very particular about how he likes his blowjobs.
Oh,
and suddenly people are gathering around the sound cart. And they're listening to Sly go, "Yeah, that's right. Stroke the shaft, cup the balls. Yeah. Stroke the shaft, cup the balls." The next morning, Sly shows up on the film set, and the whole crew are wearing T-shirts that say, "Stroke the shaft, cup the balls."
No.
Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
it happened.
Oh my gosh.
It happened.
Wow.
Now, that story that I just told you is one of the stories that I tell in my podcast, the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, which is the first season. The first season was about the making of Bordello of Blood. I've been walking around with that story in my head forever, and I just needed the pure catharsis of telling it. And that's the first season. I'm now in my 4th season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, but the first 5 episodes is the whole story of the making of Bordello of Blood. Entertainment Weekly called the first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast the best film podcast of 2022. It is that story and thousands like it. It is truly how not to make a movie. And anyway, that podcast, after I told that story, I talked to everyone I know in the filmmaking business. It's an inside baseball, nuts and bolts view of the filmmaking process. It's about the craft of it and what happens occasionally when our craft turns to crap.
Yeah.
That's
the How Not to Make a Movie. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast.
And the way you brought it around
Yes.
to advertise that was amazing.
Loved it. That was great.
That's awesome.
Well, one thing we learn how to do is one thing we learn how to do.
I'm sorry. I think it's a thing.
No. Wait. I was going to say one thing that we all learn how to do as podcasters is storytell on the fly.
Yeah.
I was asking if you had merch.
That's it.
Do you have merch that says that for your podcast?
I have T-shirts. I have T-shirts and stickers so far, but I've been doing it for 4 years. I haven't really pushed the podcast up until recently when I've begun to look for a bigger audience for it. It was a passion project. It was just something I did because, yeah, and you can either spend the time creating content or spend the time marketing your content, and I chose to spend my time making the content. And so I've got 160 episodes, and this is how I tell stories in this exact way. So if your audience likes this kind of storytelling, hey, check out my podcast. I think you'll enjoy that too. Because I started podcasting, a friend from school approached me. He originally approached me with an idea. He wanted to do a movie or a TV show. And when he told me this thing that had happened to him, absolutely true story, I said, no, you cannot do this as a TV or movie show because they will make you compromise everything that's important and good about it. And it's challenging material. In the mid-1980s, I told him, you got to do this as a podcast because it's the only way you can tell this story completely. And you have to tell the story completely. In the mid-1980s, my friend worked his way through medical school as an anonymous sperm donor. Jump forward 27 years, he joined 23andMe curious about his health genes. It never occurred to him the ramifications of contributing his DNA to a growing DNA database. That's what 23andMe is. And he lost his donor anonymity. Suddenly, 7 total strangers found Daddy. Except 6 of them had no idea their actual biological father was this guy, a sperm donor. And the 7th, a woman, and keep in mind, these are people in their late 20s. These are adults suddenly learning they're not who they thought they were. The 7th, one of the daughters, she had known for about a year that she was a donor conceived, and she had been looking for Hal. And that relationship turned really weird. Now, what Hal bumped into is the fact that, well, first of all these donor conceived people, they're all brothers and sisters, half brothers and sisters. And so this family started to form. And Hal, when he eventually got married, he raised a son from a previous marriage. He had never raised a biological child of his own. And suddenly here he had all these biological children that he hadn't raised, but he was very much open to having a family relationship with them. And that wonderful dream he had kind of got, oh boy, it just went completely bonkers. This 7th... the 7th person, she had heard about a thing called genetic sexual attraction. And she brought genetic sexual attraction into the equation. And things got weird, as you might imagine. And it screwed up the whole family dynamic that had been created. I had never heard a story like he told me. It was, and look, I have a taste for weird stories, right? And hearing this story that had happened in reality, I said, first of all, you can't do it as a movie, you can't do it as a TV show, they'll compromise it. And I said, and you can't tell the story because you'll have to change your name. I can change your name and tell the story. And, if the storyteller changes their name, they're not an honest storyteller. I said, but I can do it because, yeah, I'm protecting everyone's identities. It is the most insane story you've ever heard. And it's all absolutely true. It's called The Donor, a DNA horror story. TheDonorPodcast.com. That's one of the stories that I did when I was doing my research on the donor. Research into the donor conceived world, because this opened doors to stories I had no idea. I had no idea these worlds existed. One of the donor conceived people that I interviewed as background for this whole donor conceived world was her name was Donna Hall. And when Donna told me her story, that was a podcast into and of itself. Donna grew up in a lower tier crime family outside of Philadelphia in the 80s. And, Donna's story. And that's how I met Donna. Yeah. And Donna's story is so crazy that, you know, I thought, hey, let me help you tell your story. And that's how I ultimately met and began working with Donna. And, you know, my little company, Costard and Touchstone Productions, that produces all these things. And I've got about 10 more podcasts in various stages of about to happen or in development. My little company, our mission is to make the world a better place through storytelling. That's our goal.
What?
And
Yeah.
I think and I think Donna's story, especially because it's true crime like you've never heard it before, but it's more than that, because Donna's story is a search for safety and, more importantly, empowerment. And that's what makes Donna's story so remarkable. I think she's a fucking rock star as a storyteller. There's not an ounce of self-pity. She's funny. In the old days, I'm an old fuck, so all right. In the old days, we would have called someone like Donna a broad. She's
Right.
powerful woman who has a great sense of her own sense of self. And yeah, she is indomitable in a lot of ways. And to me, that's Donna. You know, Bette Midler is a broad. To me, that's a lot of how Donna's personality is. And it makes that story acceptable because it's so hard in places. This could be a story that would be impossible to listen to if certain other people told it, but the way that Donna tells it, and in part because it's a story about redemption and empowerment and safety, every episode, no matter how gritty or grueling, there's a kind of redemption at the end. There's uplift, and I'm so honored that Donna is willing to let me help her tell her story. It really and truly, I think it's a story that'll help make the world a better place.
I've become friends with Donna over the years. She's awesome. I love her. She's a great friend. She's so passionate about trying to get her message out and promoting her podcast and just trying to help someone. It's not about trying to make money and be a millionaire, she's trying to get help. There's somebody out there. If I went through this, there might be a kid out there going through it right now, and it might help someone. And I swear, I think she's really trying to get that message out.
I'll give away a little bit of inside stuff that maybe I shouldn't be giving this away, but, you know, we text multiple times a day, and what Donna shares with me, a lot of the response she's gotten from finally having the podcast out into the world, and the audience response, especially in people who have gone through similar things, finding courage in Donna's courage. And yeah, that means more than anything to her. I mean, it is the point of the exercise. Yeah, hey, it'd be nice to make a little bit of money and be able to pay the rent with this. But if at the end of the day, all that we did was make people's lives better, that's a bigger reward, really.
Yeah.
Truth be told.
Yeah. Dude, that's an hour. We
So
did an
good.
hour so quick.
Yeah.
You were awesome. I had a blast. If
Well,
you'll have
thank you
us
so
to
much.
have you back on again in the future, I would love to talk to you more. I'm loving it so much. I can't wait to check out your podcast because I love the Stallone story. I love all these background stories. I love it.
It is a winner. It is a winner.
No, but besides that, I grew up in a video store. When I went to Universal Studios as a kid, I cried because I'm in the movies. This is my dad's video store come to life. That was my childhood, right? I mean, the mom and pop store. And just hearing these stories and everything, it's all coming to life. I'm seeing both sides, and it's amazing. Thank you for everything tonight. Thank you.
The pleasure is mine, and I look forward to continuing the conversation whenever you want to.
Hot
Awesome.
damn. Man, we got it. You're awesome. Thank you so much. Website, anywhere
Thank you.
else
So are
where
you.
we can see you. We have a Facebook group, and I'll post everything on that. But for everybody audibly, before we wrap it up, name your podcast one more time for me for people to find you.
the podcasts that are out and about right now, there's the How Not to Make a Movie podcast at I forget what the short one is of that, but there's also the Donor Podcast, which is thedonorpodcast.com, and the Hall Closet Podcast, which is the hallclosetpodcast.com.
Awesome.
And of course, they're all available at Spotify and Apple and Amazon, wherever you look for your favorite podcast. Just look for them there; they'll come right up.
Awesome, and I'll put all the links below. Guys, thank you so much. You're the best. This was amazing. I had a blast. The only thing we have left to say is, see you next week.
Check us out online at wesiseli.com and patreon.com/Wes_Iseli for behind-the-scenes videos, blooper videos, never-before-seen footage, discounts on merchandise, magic trick tutorials, and more. That's Wes Iseli, spelled Wesiseli.